Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode, wherever in the world you're listening to us from, whatever platform you're listening to us on. As I say every episode, thank you guys so much for the support. Thank you for sharing this podcast, and thank you so much for the kind messages that you guys have sent to me. Really appreciate it, and looking forward to getting into this episode. This episode, like others I've done in the past on it, is one of my favorite topics because it deals with culture, deals with program building, and all of the almost in a sense non-basketball stuff that makes his coaching profession great. We're going to talk today about the topic of having a family atmosphere for your program and what that looks like, what that means, maybe some of the challenges that were involved, but then also if you as a coach listening right now are trying to build that atmosphere and trying to build up that positivity and build up that culture, to get some ideas from our guest as we have our discussion. And if you do have a great culture and if your team does have that family atmosphere, then hey, you might share some similarities with my guest, or there might be some new ideas that you might get to even bolster what you already got going on. Either way, I know that anybody listening is going to get something out of this. So to discuss this topic of this family atmosphere, I'm very happy to be joined by the head boys basketball coach for and I want to make sure I emphasize the McDonough High School, Coach BJ Thomas. Coach, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Thanks, Coach, for having me. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Good, doing well. Like I said, I love talking about culture. I love talking about program building in this sense, building up these young adults we get to work with. So excited to get into this one. Coach, let's go ahead and get started with your coaching journey, your basketball journey. Where's the game taking you, and what were the steps along the way that eventually led you to McDonough?
All right, so I've been coaching for about 20 years, a little over 20 years now. I started real young. I was still in college, and I was about 20 years old. It was interesting because I remember I was trying to figure out, I was in college, but I didn't know what I wanted to do in my life, honestly. I grew up in one of those houses where you were going to college. It wasn't an option.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I was actually in my third year in college. And I'm like, I'm in college, but I'm not really motivated. I'm barely hanging on GPA wise because I just had no motivation because I just didn't know why I was there. And I remember hanging out with a couple of friends, and one of them, we all went to middle school and high school together. One of them said, "Hey man, I'm coaching now." He said, "At our middle school." I said, "Oh, okay." And he was telling me about it. And I remember when he said it, it was like a light bulb went off in my head. Like, that's what I want to do. I want to coach. Like it just like hit me right then at that moment that I wanted to be a basketball coach. I played basketball in high school. You know, I wasn't good enough to be a college player, so I wasn't playing college, but I still loved the game and I wanted to be around it. But I didn't, for some reason, coaching never clicked. I didn't know what capacity I could be involved. Like, I'm not a player anymore. How can I be involved in basketball? And when he said it, I remember it like something clicked in my head, and it just started from there. And I got a job coaching the ninth grade girls team that next season. And just kind of, that was my first. I coached that school for about 4 years. In Cincinnati, that's where I was born and raised, in Cincinnati, and coached there for a few years. I actually took a year off to finish college because my last year of school schedule didn't really work out with coaching. So I took a year off from coaching, got my degree, then got back in it. And at that point, I started coaching boys, coaching boys high school at school. Then I left there after I was there about 3 seasons. Ended up at another school, and then after that, so I started, I guess it was around 99 when I started coaching.
Okay.
And then I would say around 2008 was my last year coaching in Cincinnati. I coached at 3 different schools. Like I said, I coached at a private school, all-girls school, and then I coached at 2 other private schools, coaching boys there. In 2008, I moved to Georgia, my wife and my kids. My wife was pregnant with my youngest. I have 3 kids. My youngest, my daughter, she just turned 13. And I have a 14-year-old son, and I have a 17-year-old son. And so my wife was pregnant with my daughter, and so my younger son was like 1 year old, and then my older son was like 3, about to turn 4. So family was still really young.
Yeah.
And we decided to make the move to Georgia. The first year here, I didn't coach. I didn't know anybody in Georgia in terms of coaching or anything like that. So I had no connections. I tried to get in with the school I was at. The coach told me he was full on the staff and didn't really, have any room. Even as a volunteer, I was willing to volunteer, but he said he didn't have room. So
Wow.
okay. Yeah, no, I was like, okay. So I said, okay, that's fine. And then they made a coaching change. The principal made a coaching change and brought in a new coach. And that coach was like, and I hate it because I got with that coach later. I tried to get with him earlier, like summer, and I could never get his information. By the time I got with him, he had hired all. Yes, and he had hired all his coaches. And but he was different. He was like, I said, I would like to coach. I mean, he said, well, our staff is full. I said, I can just volunteer and help out. And he was like, yeah. He said, if you're interested in doing that, that's fine. We would welcome more help. So I was like, okay, great. So that's how I started coaching here in Georgia. I was at Benjamin Banneker High School, and I coached there for 3 seasons. Yeah, about 3 seasons I was there. And then my teaching job got surplus. I was in Fulton County, where they were transferring me to another school, but this school was so far from where I live, like at least an hour ride.
Oh man.
I did everything with my county. I'm like, please, can y'all let me go somewhere else? Like they just wouldn't budge. So I just applied for other schools, and I found another school that was closer, and perfectly on time. They needed a JV boys basketball coach, and I was like, oh wow, this can't be more perfect than this. So I became the JV boys basketball coach there at North Clayton High School, and coached there for 2 years, and then finally got my first head coaching opportunity. This was 2014 now. I got my first opportunity as a head varsity coach at Jasper County High School in Monticello, Georgia. And coached there for 3 seasons. And then now I'm at McDonough. It's just I started at McDonough in 2017, 2018 season. So this is my 5th season at the school. I'm loving it. At Monticello, I was blessed to I came in, I believe everything happens in perfect timing. God has everything for you in timing it's supposed to happen. So I came into Monticello at the time where there were some good players there.
Yeah.
And they hadn't been when I got there, they hadn't been to the playoffs for 15 seasons. And we made the playoffs my first season. We weren't bouncing with the 3rd seed. We got bounced in the first round. But it was still an accomplishment for the program to reach the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which they hadn't done in 14 years. And then the next season, we made it all the way to the state Final Four, which hadn't happened in 27 years there. And so that was obviously a big accomplishment. It was a big deal in the town. And if I was excited, for me being only my 2nd year as a head coach and to go to the Final Four, it's like, wow, that just really happened. Like I couldn't believe it. And then the next year we made it to the Sweet 16 and lost. And then I, ended up, now I'm here at McDonough High School, which was interesting enough. It was Henry County High School was where I got hired. Henry County High School, they closed down that school, moved us to another building and changed our names. We're the same people, but different names. So Henry County High School became McDonough High School. So
okay.
And I say it's my 5th, yeah. So and I want to clarify that, because if I say it's my 5th season, somebody can look it up and say this school isn't even 5 years old. It's not. This is the 3rd year of the building.
I see.
Right. But it transferred. It was Henry County High School, which no longer exists. Henry County High School is now McDonough High School. So that's why it's been. Yeah, so if anybody looks it up, you think I'm lying. I'm not lying.
Got it. That's funny.
And so that's where I'm at now. And we reached the state Final Four last year, and returned 10 players from that team. Of course, the expectations are really high coming in this year. And we're pretty good with 13-1 now, so we've gotten off to a good start. And we're just trying to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of the idea of keep going, you talked about how you came into the program and things were rolling well and was able to you talked about getting in the Final Four there in those first couple of seasons. And then, as you know, boom, 2020, a lot happens and we're still in the midst of everything COVID wise and pandemic wise. And since our topic is about the idea of having a family atmosphere, I want to talk about, the elephant in the room there and how the pandemic and how that whole situation that not only did you go through last year, but are still kind of going through, how did it kind of change or challenge your team's family atmosphere, and how did they have to kind of grow, and how did you and the program kind of have to grow and persevere through everything that's happened and I guess is still happening right now?
Yeah, what made it even tougher for us is that so that the team that I had the year before the pandemic, I had 7 seniors on that team.
Mm-hmm.
So I graduated a lot. So the team last year was really young. I had, guys that had played JV that hadn't played really significant varsity minutes. I had another kid that transferred in from another school. He was a sophomore and a good player, but he had come from a small private school where the competition level wasn't quite the same. So it was still kind of new to him. I had a freshman who ended up starting for us on varsity, good player, but still a freshman is a freshman. And so it was challenging in that regard because I was already bringing a lot of new pieces together. And then we were limited, we had to start our workouts later than normal. There were no summer games like we're used to doing, summer practices. All that stuff went out the window. And then they finally kind of started letting us work out. But understandably, some parents were leery and didn't let the kids come and work out first, which I understood. And so you kind of had to deal with all of that. We eventually got everybody. And so our numbers were really small last year, just in general as a program, because we were virtual. So you didn't have many kids in the school. So there was no finding a young kid in the building that might can play on your JV or something. There was none of that because there was nobody in the building. And when they started letting some kids come to the building, it was very few. Trying to get the word out of tryouts and workouts because there's no putting on the morning announcements because there's nobody there to hear the announcements. So you're trying to tweet it out and send it out word of mouth. And so, yeah, all that stuff made it tough and it makes it harder to build that family atmosphere because it was so hard to get everybody together.
Sure, of course.
To even build that. So, and it wasn't a animosity thing. There was nobody had any beef with anybody or anything. They just didn't know each other. So
yeah,
it definitely made it a little more difficult when you have to when you had the pandemic keeping you separate and yet you're trying to bring them closer. That's tough.
yeah, it's one of those like really interesting situations where like you said, and I know I've experienced that with my program too. It was like when we lost as many seniors as we did, it was like there was this like disconnect with like the players who were coming into the program, right? And it was like, oh, wait a minute, like you don't even know like who I am. You haven't really seen me. You're not around in the school halls or at all. It was like everything just sort of went like dark for a little bit, and it was, I think a lot of programs are kind of going through that. But it sounds like now, like as you're talking about the success you've been having so far this season, that it seems like your program has sort of gotten itself back on track, gotten its feet under it, and you've been able to kind of recreate or still maintain that atmosphere.
Yeah, definitely. And this year it's really been good because, as I mentioned, that was a new group last year, but 10 of them, came back. Only lost 2 seniors off last year's team. Now you have all these guys coming back who knew each other, who played together that year, who made a great Final Four run on a year. Last year was our down year. On paper, last year was supposed to be my worst team on paper. A lot of inexperience, a lot of youth, guys that just didn't have varsity experience. So we were supposed to not be very good. And we started off that way. We were below 500 through the Christmas break. And then I think Christmas, right at the end of Christmas break, we finally broke 500. And we stayed above 500 the rest of the way. But our record wasn't stellar. I think we ended the regular season with maybe 15 wins. I think we ended up with some of the range. We ended the year total, including the Final Four, with 18 wins. So, and let you know, we didn't have a lot of wins in the regular season. We just kind of barely finished above 500. But we went on that, great run in the tournament, and that did a lot for their confidence to say when they looked around and said, "Wow, we reached this Final Four with all this inexperience. Now we're all coming back next year. Well, man, what can we do with it?"
Yeah.
And so it definitely. So this year, keeping that family atmosphere going has been easier because they've been around each other for a long time now, and they like each other and they enjoy each other's company, and they all want to win and be state champions. So it hasn't been as difficult this year as it maybe has been in years past.
Yeah, and that's always cool when your team has like that, not only that great amount of success, but then it's like they're all like coming back pretty much the next year too. It's like, all right, let's run it back and let's do it again. Like that's such a fun situation to be in, to know like you can keep going and keep building on what you had before. That's awesome.
Definitely. That helped a lot. Yep.
So let's just talk about in the general sense for those listening, so they can paint the picture of what goes on there at McDonough about the concept of family. What when you hear that term, and then this was a term I know that you were passionate about, the idea of having a family atmosphere. What does that term family mean to you, and how did that message kind of get carried and conveyed to your team?
So to me, it just means that we as a group, we have to treat our bond, our group, as something sacred, right? So your bond with your teammates and your coaches, all of us as a staff, and include managers, everybody who's a part of what we're trying to build, that has to be important to you, and you have to revere it and you have to respect it. So, that part of that is I don't allow others to talk down about my team, about my teammates or whatever, right? Because we're a family. And I always compare it to their blood families so they can kind of get the picture of what I'm talking about. So I'll tell them, like, if they have a sibling or something, I say, hey, especially when I have siblings that are on the team, it's easy for me to point it out. So I say, hey, this is your brother right here. Do you ever get mad at him? Yeah, of course. Y'all ever fight, whether verbal or physical? Yeah, sometimes say, well, we might physically fight. We haven't done that in a long time. Or yeah, we argue. I say now, but if you guys are out in public somewhere and somebody else is trying to fight your brother, you gonna stand around for that? And of course they're like, well, no, of course not. That's exactly, and that's what you have to understand. Us being family, it doesn't mean we're always gonna be pleased with each other. It doesn't mean we're always gonna get along. I tell them sometimes you're gonna be mad at me as your coach. Sometimes I'm gonna be mad at you, and it happens that way. Coaches, we don't always agree with each other on everything. Like,
Yeah.
so I try to make sure they understand family doesn't mean it's going to be kumbaya at all times with us. It's not. Sometimes you're going to be like, this coach gets on my nerves, man. I'm getting sick of that. Like, you're going to think that sometime, and it's okay. And I'm going to think that about you sometime. I'm going to say, why did he's getting on, but when we're family, we get past that stuff. We understand that, we have a bond that's much deeper than that, and we can get over that. And again, I might feel that way about you, but I'm not going to let anybody else do it. I remember 3 years, my last year in the old building, when I said we were Henry County High School, we got upset in the first. We were the 2 seed. We were expected to make a deep run in the playoffs, and we got upset in the first round. We just played a horrible game. And so one of my players, and he didn't have a great game. He knows it, and I know it. But it is what it is. Well, somebody sent me a message the next day. They said, do you see what people are saying about your guys on Twitter? I hadn't, because we got upset, I purposely didn't check social media. I was like, I don't see anything negative, so I'm not checking.
Yeah.
So I'm like, no. So I go check, and somebody, and I think it's some person lonely just created a burner account, because I never saw this person's account prior to this moment, and I haven't seen him since.
Oh, one of those. Okay.
Exactly. And they tweeted a picture of this particular player with some very disparaging remarks about him and his game that night. And I was livid. And I immediately responded to him, letting him know, like, you're not about to sit on here and talk about my players like this and that. And we had like a kind of a back and forth exchange. And then he eventually blocked me, on the Twitter. And I reached out to my athletic director and our county AD, and I was like, somebody needs, like, no, he's not about to put this about my players. And they did kind of go into some research. Eventually, I think they got the account taken down or something. But that's what I mean by family. Like, I might be upset at a player of mine, but you're not their coach. You're not part of our family. So you're not going to put them out there. Because I wouldn't put them out publicly anyway. Like, I would never do that. That's family. And part of family is defending one another. So, when I saw that being said about my player, I said, that I'm not going to stand for. I don't care.
Yeah.
And it was important to me that my players see that and understand that, and that they feel that way about each other. Like, you have to have your teammates back. That's family. You just like you have your mother's back, your father's back, your brother, your sister. That's how this has got to be. And I stress that, the importance of that with our team at all times. You don't let anybody disrespect your teammate, because we are family. And if you're not willing to view us like family, then this isn't the right atmosphere for you, because I view it as a family. I don't view it as we're just teammates and that's it. I don't view it that way. I view it as family, and as we are developing a lifelong bond. Even when I tell my players that even when you graduate, it doesn't mean we have to talk every day or anything like that. I'm not expecting that. but you are still part of my extended family. You know, you don't play for me anymore, but I still care about what happens to you and what you're doing with your life. And if you have kids, I want to meet your kids. Like that's true family. You know, it's not, you don't play for me anymore. So, hey, what does it matter? Like, you know, I genuinely care about you as a human being. And I want them to understand they have to view each other that same way.
Yeah, and it's I think one of the things that I know some coaches, you know, they might struggle with a little bit, and so I'm going to kind of pivot and ask you this question because you brought it up a couple times. It's a fair point with family. You know, you're not always going to agree all the time, and there's going to be times, like you said, where you know maybe like teammates are going to get into it a little bit with each other, and at the end of the day, as you said, though, they'll have each other's back, but there's going to be some moments where they're going to, you know, get upset at each other and, you know, get frustrated for one reason or the other. So I wanted to ask, how have you kind of maintained it where players can potentially, you know, get frustrated with each other, get upset with each other, but not have it be a situation where it carries over and you know ruins, you know, the team chemistry or ruins the team atmosphere? And how are your players able to sort of recompose themselves and then play and have each other's back when maybe sometimes it gets a little heated or there's disagreements?
Yeah. One thing that helps is that a lot of my players are actually friends off the court, you know, without me. So when you're already friends off the court without me, then a lot of that stuff kind of fixes itself without me having to intervene at all. Like I see them get mad at each other, but I know these two hang out, so they're going to be fine after practice. I don't really have to say anything. Um, Now, and there are times when you might see it going a little too far. There are times when you might feel like, okay, well, these two aren't necessarily friends. They're not enemies, but they're not friends. So theirs might not be as easy to resolve. So if there's a line between, you know, having intensity in practice and things like that and being disrespectful. And so I let my players get intense with each other. I let them get angry at each other. I let them get physical and do some shoving and pushing that doesn't go too far because that's just part of what they do as part of the game. Now, if the language of things become disrespectful, then that's when I step in and say, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, no, you don't talk to your teammate like that. Don't do this. Like, so I won't let it go too far because again, even with family, there are limits. You might get mad at your brother. Just, you know, my kids, I have 3 kids myself. They get mad at each other, of course, but they know there's certain things that they know we're not going to tolerate hearing them say to one another. If we hear something like that, we're going to step in and say, "Oh no, you don't talk to your sister like that. You don't talk to your brother like that." Y'all can argue all you want to. That happens, but there's a certain level of respect that has to be maintained, and I think and that's one of the things that I stress. You know, I'll give them some leeway when, you know, because I demand a lot in practice and I demand intensity. I demand they play hard. So you can't demand that and then not expect that, hey, tempers are going to flare sometimes in practice, and they do. But as long as nothing gets disrespectful, I let it go. But if I see it becoming disrespectful, now I've had to pull players to the side sometimes who I could tell that their language was too much for their teammates. And I told them, listen, you got to watch how you talk to them. They're not, people aren't going to respond to you that way. You know, you're trying to get them to play better, but the way you're saying it isn't going to work. You've got to change the way you're saying it. And I think for the most part, players will respond to that. And players who want to win and who want to be successful, they will listen and respond to that. Or players who actually aren't trying to be mean, because it's not always players trying to be mean or trying to be jerks. Sometimes they just get emotional and don't think about what they're saying, and you got to remind them. And so for the most part, they always respond positively to me in that regard, and they will adjust. Okay, let me watch how I'm saying it. All right,
and
upset.
I think part of that comes for like you were saying, like you as a coach also got to kind of like know your players well enough and understand like, hey, you know, I know as a coach what I need to say to this one particular player or how that, you know, one particular player needs to be motivated or what I can and can't say to them. So then, as you mentioned, that you'll know like, okay, if one of their teammates is talking to them a way that I know they're not going to respond to, then I can pull them aside. It seems like it's important for you as a coach to also like know who your players are individually and their personalities, so that way you know like exactly when, you know, somebody's saying something to them that they're not going to take well.
Yeah, and that's part of the, you know, the leadership that I have to show as a coach. because I know, as you mentioned, every player is different. There are some players that I know the best way to get the best out of them is that I just got to get in them and go off, and it works for them. And I know other players that's going to have the exact opposite effect, and they're going to bury their head in the sand, and they're not going to be able to perform. And so I have to know the difference. I say, okay, this player I can scream and yell at, and he actually probably needs me to scream and yell at him because nothing else works. However, this other player, I can't do that to him. I gotta, and that's what I tell, especially point guards. I'm very hard on my point guards because they're leaders on the court, and I tell them that you've got to understand you cannot talk to all of your teammates. You can yell at him and say that to him, and even though he might get mad at you, it's not going to really bother him. He's just going to do what he's doing. But if you say it to this other player, you're going to hurt his confidence, and now he's not going to play well. So you've got to understand who you're talking to as a point guard out there, as the leader, and know what buttons to push or which player to get the best out of them. And so I think I have to demonstrate that as a coach, and then when I demonstrate that, then I can show them how I'm doing. See, look, this is how I'm dealing with this player. I don't deal with this player that way. You've got to understand that as a leader. And that's what I try to stress.
Yeah, and your players, I'm sure they notice that right away, because I'm sure they know that, like, hey, I noticed that, coach talks to this one player this way, and man, coach, rips into this other player the other way. But if it works for them, it works for them. And I also, just as an aside, I agree with you about the point guard part. I feel like my point guards get the most of I don't know how to word this, my passionate speeches or my passionate conversations definitely get directed at my point guards a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think they've got to be able to take that. And I tell them that, like, you're the leader of the team, so you've got to be able to, take that. I'm going to be hard. And I tell them I'm going to be harder on you than the other players most of the time, because you're usually the leader. Now, sometimes, and I tell players this, sometimes the point guard isn't necessarily the main leader. It aren't always. But most times they are. Like last year, I told you I had a freshman start, and he started at point guard. Well, it was only so hard I could be on him. He was a true freshman. Never played varsity a day in his life. So I wasn't as hard on him as I was on previous point guards who had more experience, because he was inexperienced. So a lot of his mistakes I had to just kind of deal with and correct him in different ways, because I'm like, he's learning, he's going to make, and I told my staff at the start of the year, I said, he's a freshman, he's going to make a lot of mistakes. I said, and we're just going to have to deal with it. We're going to have to ride with him and push through as he learns on the fly. And it's just gonna happen. We got to understand that. So I had to, and he had some bad games earlier. He had some stinkers, but by the end of the year, he was playing great, and he ended up winning freshman of the year in the state of Georgia. Because we stuck with it and let him. So with him, I was harder on the non-point guards who were older than him than I was him, because I said, yes, he's a point guard. I said he might initiate the offense, and I told him, I said, well, y'all, he's not going to lead this team. He's not ready to do that. His only job is just to initiate the offense right now. He's not ready to be a leader. I need you other guys who have played for me, even though they didn't all have a lot of varsity experience, but they had a little bit, and they had played in my program, so they at least knew me and knew my program. I said, I expected more out of them. So you got to be able to adjust to every situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't imagine, putting the weight on the world on a true freshman's shoulders, saying, all right, you're the leader. You got to tell everybody what's going on and how business gets done.
Yeah. Now his leadership now as a sophomore is great.
Oh, I'm sure.
On the court, I mean, he directs traffic as well as anybody. So I had to let him grow into that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. When you first stepped into the program, did you find that creating that family atmosphere, was that something that was pretty easy for you to do, or were there some challenges that you had to face on the way, or were there any bumps in the road from getting the atmosphere the way you wanted it?
There were definitely some challenges, especially my first year in Henry County. There were some challenges. There was, because it was interesting dynamic, because when I took over, the team had gone to the state Final Four the year before. However, they had graduated most of that team.
Okay.
And so we weren't expected to do very well at all. They had graduated like 10 seniors off that team. So people told me to my face, y'all aren't going to be any good. I just what I said, you're not going to be good.
That's good.
And I honestly wasn't sure when I took the job. I took it though because it was in my community, it was closer to my home. So I said, okay, this might be a little rebuild, but it's okay. We'll get. And But we ended up being way better. We ended up, making to the state playoffs. We finished second in the region, 18 win season. Because I had, there was a couple of guys who didn't play the previous year because they were ineligible from transfer.
Okay.
So there were like 3 guys like that I didn't know about, that people weren't counting on, that would have played varsity the year before. They just weren't eligible. So I'm like, okay, these guys. And then you had, because their varsity was so good the previous year, you had some really good kids that were on the JV that probably would have played varsity at a lot of other places. They had another kid who had come off an injury the year before that would have been a varsity level player. So there were a lot of hidden gems when I came there. But the problem is, there was also with that group, I think a lot of, I don't think jealousy is the word that I want to use, but there definitely were a lot of egos and a lot of guys who thought they should be the guy. And with us losing so many people from the year before, you had 3 or 4 guys that thought, okay, this is my team now this year.
Okay, yeah.
And with me being a new coach, they all wanted to show the new coach that they're the guy. And so there was part of that, because I had to come in. I remember that summer, because I had no idea who could play. So I literally took 20 players to the summer games to play, because I had no idea who could play. And I didn't want to cut anybody, because I was like, I don't know, I might cut the wrong person.
Yeah, get them all out there. Yeah.
So just imagine playing summer games and trying to get minutes of 20 guys. That's impossible. But I tried the best I could through games. Like, I had to tell some of you, on this game, I'm just not going to play some of you. I said, I can't play 20 guys in one game. It's just no way possible to do it. But I said, but I don't want to cut y'all, because I don't know who can play yet. I'm giving you all a chance. So, but it was tough, because there were a lot of people who thought they were supposed to be the guy. It was their year. And I had to, in that year, I really worked really hard on trying to build team chemistry and character. I spent one day a week on just that. Every Wednesday was character day. And I heard about another coach that did that. I was like, I'm gonna try that. And I had a guy that would even come in and do lessons with them. And that was really what it was. Like, I was really trying to get these guys to build that team bond. But I don't think it ever really worked the way I wanted it to that first year. Again, they weren't enemies. They didn't hate each other.
You just
but
could
the
kind of
bond
feel
that
it.
I wanted with the team, it never really quite clicked. I think there were just too many agendas that first year. As they were learning me and I was learning them, it became really difficult to get past that. And so, yeah, that was tough. And then, the next year was a little better. That team, and we won a lot more games. We won 25 games that year, but that was the year, like I said, we got upset in the first round. So there was still, last year, honestly, was probably the first season here where I think there were none of those issues.
And I think, just real quick before I cut you, I think that's like a big point to mention, is that, this is a process. This is a journey. We talk about the kind of like the finished product of where you're at right now, but you gotta have a level of patience with it and understand it won't be a overnight thing necessarily.
It won't at all. We want it to be. All us coaches want it to be, but it definitely takes time. And it took time to really build that atmosphere and build guys that want to do what's best for the team and aren't just worried about their numbers and their stats, their minutes. And I think we finally got to that point, and it's made a big difference.
Yeah, and like you said, it's a journey, right? The whole process. It definitely takes time, and it's not an overnight thing. And as you've slowly started to build your team and kind of get it to the way that you want in terms of the family atmosphere, has what you've been able to run on the court been able to change at all? Are there things that you're able to kind of run or implement on the court that you think are either more successful because your team plays as a family, or maybe that you wouldn't be able to do if they didn't play as a family?
I don't know that there's anything in particular that I'm able to run. I think when you have that family atmosphere, I just think it helps. I don't care what you run. I think it's going to help all of that run better, because part of that family atmosphere is understanding your teammates. So when they're on that court, whatever we're running, when you really understand the guy next to you, teammates understand what to look for and who's going to be open. And even bigger than that, they want to see their teammates succeed. So, in years past, what I've had is certain players having a great game. And he's playing like I had this. It's a perfect example.
Mhm.
I had a kid that was playing well in the game, and I called an isolation play for him a couple of consecutive times because he was just having a great game. So after I called it for him a couple of times, one of the players comes over, Coach, call it for me too. Why? He's the one that's having a great game. Call it for you. Why? Just because you just want to score two, and see, that's the difference. That's the difference. Like when it's a family atmosphere and you have that true team bond, that player doesn't ask that question. He understands this guy's having a great game. I'm enjoying watching him have a great game because that's my brother. I don't want to. Well, now it's my turn. And I stress that to my players in games. I tell them that. And these are things I'll point out in practice. Let's say we come down, a guy hits a three, boom, and we come down the next possession, hits a three again, boom. And we come down to the next possession, the guy drives, and the same guy that just hit 2 threes open, and he doesn't pass the ball to him. And I'll stop and point that out. This man just hit 2 threes in a row. Why would we not give him another look to see if he's still hot?
Mm-hmm.
I said, That's what you got to do, fellas. It can't be, okay, he's hit 2 threes, so now it's my turn. I tell him, no, it's not your turn. It's his turn, and it's his turn again, as long as he's on. And when your team has that family bond, that family atmosphere, they understand that and they want that. And I remember, and I will say this, my first Final Four team, my first job at Monticello, I always tell this story of this kid because it showed such selflessness, and it showed when you really want to succeed, what you'll do. We're in the Elite Eight game, and we're up, and it's a game most of the states said we would lose to this team by 20 points. We were 20-point underdogs. We're going to get blown out. This team was averaging 88 points. They had just put up 101 the game before us, and we held them to 67 points. But it was all about, we're going to get blown out. We don't have enough. We're too slow. We can't do this, that, and the other. So, but we're winning. Fourth quarter, we're up. And I went to, and one of my guards, he was only a sophomore, was having an amazing game. He's coming down. He's just coming down the transition and just, boom, scoring whenever he wants to. So I went to go call a set play. I don't remember what, I went to go. And my point guard leader, senior, he ran over to me and said, no, coach, don't call anything. Let him keep going. This is his game. They can't stop him. I said, okay. And I stepped back, and that's what we did. But that, things like that, when you have players that say that, to me, that shows such selflessness and such leadership on his part. Like, he didn't say, call something for me, coach. Call my number. He said, my teammate over there is killing, and they can't do anything with him. Let him keep killing, and I respect that he said that to me, and I let him, okay, I'm not, some coaches, no, run what I said. I'm not that coach. I'm not that coach. If you think you see something on that court, and he made a good point when he said it, he hit me. I said, he's right. I'm about to overcoach this thing. He's right. This player is going off. I don't need to call a play just until they figure out a way to stop him. And that's what we did. And, I think that kid ended up with like 17 points in that game. And so those are the type of thing when you have a team that does that, when they say, hey, call a play for him, not call my play, call a play for him because they can't stop him. That's a beautiful thing. And that's a team that's hard to beat.
Yeah, and you bring up a point as an aside too. If that is, it's also, and I've been there. It's very easy to overcoach in those situations and kind of do the my way or the highway type thing. But then again, as I hear that story, it really makes you think and like step back and realize, like, man, that's a player who's saying like, it's not about me right now. Like, this is let's work with this guy who's rolling right now, and let's keep rewarding that because it's going well. And I think that it's really is a lot rarer than maybe sometimes coaches think where that happens, especially because I think you said he was a sophomore too.
Yeah, the one that was doing all the scoring was a sophomore. The one that said let him keep going was a senior. Like,
yeah, and I know that those dynamics can get tricky when you got seniors and underclassmen too sometimes. So to have somebody like that say that, it's like, oh, okay, you really have bought in. You really
exactly.
are about
and
it.
And another thing about that particular player, and we were in our region tournament, and I remember this is a retired coach I knew. We had just won the game for the region tournament, and he came to me and he pointed at that kid, the senior. He said, "Coach, that's the head of your snake right there." I said, "Oh, I know." He said, "I can tell." He said, "I'm sitting in the stands saying this to people, and they're like, 'No, you're crazy, man. It's this guy and it's that guy.'" He said, "Y'all don't see what I'm seeing because the senior wasn't a big scorer, so he's not scoring all these points." So they're like, well, no, it's this guy. He's a shooter, and this guy's the one that's getting to the basket. And he said, I saw what he was doing for y'all. When y'all got out of control, he got the ball, slowed your offense down, got people in position. I said, exactly. I said, those are the things that he does, the plays he makes. He wasn't a college level player, and he knew he wasn't. He wasn't like, man, I want all these offers. He understood his limitations, but he was such a crucial part of our success because he was such a great leader, high IQ, and because he accepted his limitations, he got everybody else where they needed to be. And when you find selfless players like that, man, not surprisingly, this player is a coach now. He's coaching middle school, so it's
Yeah,
not
that's kind of how it goes. Yeah.
He's a coach. It doesn't shock me, and yeah, that's beautiful when you have that.
Well, and I think just as another add-on to this whole point about, having a team that plays like a family and has that atmosphere, the fact that you could have a player who's not exactly your best player or your most prolific scorer be the one who can settle everyone down. To me, that's huge to have a player like that, because I've been in situations, and I know coaches who talked about, if it's not the best player who's the one doing all the talking, then sometimes their teammates might shut them out or not really listen because they're not the ones in charge. So to have somebody who's not necessarily the superstar player but can still like command everyone's attention, I think speaks a lot to everybody understanding like, hey, it isn't always just about the one who scores the most.
That's right. Yeah,
and that's great to see. I wanted to go back to something that you said that you tried implementing. You said it wasn't as good as maybe you had hoped it would be, but I thought it was interesting. You talked about how you tried to implement like weekly like character days. Do I got that right?
Yeah.
Is that was something
Yes.
you tried to implement? So
Yes.
what was that like? What was the what were those days intended to do?
So what we did, we would do two things. I had a gentleman that would come from FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes. He would come and do some devotionals and things like that. His portion wouldn't be long. He might be there 30 minutes or so. Then when he finished, I would do team building activities. I actually got a book that had like team building activities, and I picked out different ones, and I would do a different one each week. And we would do that team building activity. Some of the activities were real quick, took a little longer, but I did these to try to build that team chemistry, not let them just bunch up in their little groups, because there were little cliques on the team. These two are really close, and these three are really close. And I was trying to kind of knock those walls down so that we're all really close. And so we did that literally every single Wednesday for the entire season. Every Wednesday we did that. We didn't even always get on the court and practice. We might just do that and go home, and that was it. And I told him, because to me that was what was so important. Like, we had to get the chemistry, together. And now I haven't, and the crazy thing is I haven't even done that since then. I think I felt that team needed it so much more. And that's why I stressed it so much.
Yeah.
So I don't do that now, but I think I just try to make it a part of what we do every day. We'll do team bonding activity. I try to do something at least once a month, some type of team bonding activity that's not related to basketball, to just let them just have fun together, get to know each other and grow as a group. And so that's what so that's just kind of how so I haven't done the character day in a while. And I do think it's still a good idea. I just hadn't gone back to it yet. But yeah, that's what the intention was, and that's kind of how I framed it, how I modeled it. But it was just tough with that first group.
Well, I mean, and as you said, if that first group, they don't know you, and
Nope.
you don't know them that well, and you don't know the
Yep.
situation that they were in before, and
Right.
you every situation that a coach goes in could be different. I've seen situations where coaches come in and they're like the third coach in 3 years, and so a junior or senior doesn't even trust that coach is going to even stick around for more than a year, so they're going to test them and everything like that. So all those situations, like you said, are different. But something else that you brought up that I thought was interesting is the idea now, even when your team chemistry and they play like a family, but you still emphasize them doing some team bonding and getting to know each other. And I think it speaks to something that seems to be important to you, that it's not just about necessarily building that family atmosphere, but also like maintaining it and not feeling like it's ever necessarily finished, and that there's always room for like the team to grow and get to know each other better. And that's the sense I'm getting, at least.
Yeah, it's never. Yeah, I agree with that totally. It's never done. It's never like, well, we got the family atmosphere, so we don't have to do anything. Like, no, you have to work at it, even in your natural blood family, in your house. Like, it's not just. I think it's as simple as, well, we look at it like a marriage. All right. I don't know if you're married. I'm married. You can't just, all right, we took our vows, so we're married now, so now we don't have to do anything else. We're good. Like that it doesn't work
Well,
that way.
it was that easy, huh?
Yeah, it would be nice if it was that easy. It's not. That bond has to be nurtured on a regular basis between husband and wife. You can't just be, we're married now, so now we don't even have to really do anything. Love, you have to work at it. Same thing with your family, you know, your siblings. Like we try to make sure that we make time in our house for our family. We'll have family movie nights sometime. We'll be like, hey, we're all meet up in the living room and pick a movie and watch a movie together. You have to work at being a family. You have to work at maintaining that closeness. It doesn't just happen naturally just because you call yourself a family. And if we have to do that with our natural families, of course, you're going to have to do that with a family atmosphere that you're really trying to create from a bunch of different people, different backgrounds. Sometimes you have a kid on your team that's rich, another one that's dirt poor. You have one that comes from he's adopted, never knew his parents. The other one comes from both parents, loving household. Like,
Yeah.
they're coming from such different backgrounds. So you have to work to build that type of bond. They're so different, and it has to be a consistent effort to build that and then maintain it once it's there. I felt coming into this year that this year it wasn't going to be so much of us having to build it because they were already close. But we still needed to, and I told my assistants this, but we still needed to work to maintain it. I can't sit back as a coach and assume that they're going to stay close just because they started the season close. Because one thing I knew coming into this season, the expectations being high, and some of my guys getting a little attention, well, it's easy for egos and jealousy to slip in. So we have to make sure as coaches that we don't allow that to happen. It's easy. And, this guy's the best player. Now, this guy's the best player. He's getting to look from this college. He's getting to look from this college. Now it's easy for guys to go in the game. I need to keep my stats up. I need to get my shots. We don't, we don't tolerate it at all. We're very tough on selfish play. If you're playing selfish, we will sit you down and tell you about it. We don't tolerate it at all. You're driving down, two people on you. There's an open man, and you don't pass the ball. They know that they will see closest thing to the devil come out of me. You do that. So it's unselfish play is demanded in our program. It's not an option. You don't have the option to be selfish and just go get your shots.
Well, something I'm glad that you brought up real quick before I forget is the idea about, you try to build this family atmosphere and what that atmosphere is going to look like for your program when your program maybe doesn't have a lot of expectations. It's going to be a little bit different. Like you said, it's going to be tested, or it's going to have new expectations placed on it once you start seeing success. And once success has started to be expected of you, there's going to be like new challenges and new things that could potentially come up that could disrupt that family atmosphere, that like the foundation that you may have built when your team was up and coming, like you said, constantly needs to be worked at, because where McDonough is at right now has new challenges that maybe they hadn't experienced before.
Absolutely. No, it has to be. Another thing that I think has helped, and I got this also from another coach, and that's why it's great when you have, friends who coach, and you talk to other coaches. We rate all of our shots that they take in the game. We rate each player's shots, quality of the shot they take. From an open layup, the highest rating you can get is an open layup. The lowest rating you can get is a 0 if you just shoot some ridiculous shot that we don't know where that came from. And so contested shots are rated low. And so I rate all of their shots individually and give them a score after each game, so they can see when they're taking bad shots.
Yeah.
You're being contested when there's two people on you, and that brings your rating down. And because I try to stress to them, I only stress what type of shot it is, not whether it went in or didn't go in, because that doesn't matter. You can shoot a bad shot and it can go in. You can shoot a great shot and it misses. It doesn't change what quality the shot was. So I try to get them away from shooting contested jump shots. A man's all over you and pull up and shoot a jumper in his face when there's an open teammate. And to the credit, I have some guys on my team that can make some of those shots. They can. But I don't want them to make that a steady diet of that. Those are not good quality shots, and those end up being selfish plays. So you're covered. It's fine. Find your open teammate. He'll be open. it'll get back to you because I'm going to demand the same thing from him. So it's not like, well, if I give it to him, I'm never going to get it back. You're going to get it back because he's demanded to give it back to you when you're open.
Yeah.
And so I want you all to see. And one thing they've seen, I show them when I rate the shots, it pretty much never fails. The more we win by points wise, usually the better shot selection we took as a team. Games that we lose, that we've lost, and maybe barely won, we didn't play well, the shot selection is usually lower. And so they kind of see that. Look, when you guys take bad shots, tough shots, contested shots, we don't win at the same rate. We might win, but we struggle or we lose. When you take great shots, we win going away. So trying to get them to understand that, because that's part of not playing selfish and playing like a family, playing like a team. I'm not taking bad shots. That means I'm covered. So if I'm covered and somebody else is open, let me find who has the mismatch. Maybe I don't have the mismatch. Who has the mismatch? And I try to teach them that with certain plays. I'm trying to get them. Sometimes we'll call plays. And if, as a coaching staff, we might know which side we need to go with this play because we see what the mismatch is.
Sure.
So sometimes I'll tell them, when we're running this, go to this side. And other times I won't tell them. I want to see, do they see the mismatch? Run this play.
Test them, see if they get what's going on.
Yeah, and if they don't, sometimes the film I have to show them. And they'll see it. I say, what side should we have gone to? We should have gone there because he had this guy on it. Right. But I need y'all to see those things. I can't always point it out to you in the game. I need you to know this guy has the mismatch. Let's find him. That's part of, that unselfish play.
Yeah, and that's another good, just as a brief aside to that, I think in the idea of just like having a family atmosphere is even being able to have those conversations, those honest conversations in a film room, because I know I've been in situations before where, teams or players, they dread, getting film or getting talked about their film and looking at how they play, or even feeling in a sense that they might be called out on it. But if they trust you and they trust what you're saying, and like what you as a coach, your coaching staff is saying is meant to get them to be better players, then that shows that there's that atmosphere of trust that's built, and you can do a lot when that's been established, especially in the film room.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so,
and I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no. Finish up your point. I had a follow-up question to that, so go ahead and finish up your point.
Well, no, and I was just going to say, going back to the film room thing, part of that is when players see that everybody's treated equally. So when they see in the film room that I'm, because I'm jumping on everybody in the film room. I'm pointing out everybody's mistakes. Everything you did wrong, I'm pointing it out. So they won't feel like, well, this guy doesn't get picked on. I will find something you did wrong, whether it's on the defensive end or on the offensive end. And so they see, there's no favorites, or there's certain rules I have, and they know there's certain rules I have, and it doesn't matter if you're the last guy on the bench or you're a leading scorer. If there are certain things that get you on the bench, you're on the bench. And when they see that you'll stick by that, they're like, oh, okay, coach means this. And he won't show favoritism. He really will bench whoever if they break this rule. He won't, he'll sit whoever he has to sit. And if we win or lose the game because of it, I mean,
and you're going to be tested as a coach to hold yourself to that when it's your best player who's doing that.
You do. And that's why, and this is God honest truth. When I make certain rules, I ask myself this. If it's a rule where I say, I ask myself, if my best player breaks this rule, what would I be willing to do? And whatever it is, that's what I make the consequence. Because a lot of times coaches make these rules. If you do this, you're not playing. And then their best player does it. Oh, well,
I didn't
they don't want to do it.
Them that did it.
Yeah, you shouldn't have made that the rule then, because now if you don't stick by it, now your word doesn't mean anything. Now your players don't trust you.
Nah, it's over. So, all it takes is that one moment, and then you're done.
So if I know I wouldn't bench my best player for breaking this rule, then I don't make it a rule. It's just that simple. That's just that's how I live by. And the other ones I say, I would bench my best player for this. So let me go ahead and add this rule. And I'm confident I will stick by this no matter who breaks it. Like, you got to be able to, do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And just to kind of wrap that up for a coach who's, maybe taking over like a new program, like you were in that situation, if you are taking over a program, you might be taking over for a coach who did break those rules, and your players might not have any trust in coaches or not believe anything they say. So, you might not have that buy-in right away, and you're going to have to hold to it. But if you consistently hold to it, then they'll know. It's like, oh, if they're on the bench, well, you know, what's my excuse if that person got benched for it? You know, I'm going to be benched if I don't do what
That's
I'm
it.
supposed
And
to
you
do.
got and that happened at my first head job. That definitely happened, and I had to, you know, I sent a guy home, you know, one day who was one of our best players, would have been a starter. But you have to do those things like early in the beginning when it won't hurt you too bad. You can't wait and let them get away with stuff, and then now you want to try to. You can't do
Well,
that.
you can't
So
get it back. You can't just put
nope.
it
When I
back.
got in the door, I said, "Oh, you don't want to do what you're supposed to do? Go home." And I remember the assistant coach who had been there. He was nervous. He said, well, "I hope he comes back." I said, "If he doesn't come back, then he's not the type of player I want." And he did come back, and everything was great after that. But sometimes you got to send that message, like, "No, I don't know what you used to, but now that's no longer allowed." No.
Yeah, and the message got loud and clear, I'm sure, right away. I was like, "Oh, okay, well,
Yep.
message heard." And then there you
Yep.
go. You've already established it, and away you can go. Now you can move on.
That's it.
Perfect.
That's it.
What advice, and we've actually given throughout here bits and pieces here, but I wanted to address that question formally. What advice would you give to a coach whose team may not be playing as a family, or they may be just be struggling with that whole family atmosphere? What advice would you give to a coach who's going through that sort of a situation?
One, you have to be deliberate in trying to get them to become a family. As I mentioned, you can talk about it, you can say it all you want to, but you have to actually put them in position to become that, such as team bonding events, like I mentioned, letting them do things together as a group outside of basketball, not basketball related. Whether it's going to the movies, going bowling, playing laser tag. If you want to bring, some coaches bring the kids to their house, some don't. Whatever your comfort level is on that. Um, but something non-related where we're just hanging out and enjoying each other's company. We're not watching film. We're not playing basketball. We're just helping them to get to know one another. But it has to be deliberate. You can't just hope that you can't just tell them, hey, you guys should hang out after practice. Well, they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. You got to make them hang out after practice. You got to make them by doing things as a team, as a unit. And then being quick to reward selfless acts. And the reward might just be verbal praise. It doesn't have to be you can give them something tangible. It might just be in practice. Somebody made the extra pass. Making sure that everybody sees you recognize that. You acknowledge that. That was a selfless play. Thank you. Made that extra pass. Finding the open teammate. Great. Or if you and then quickly condemning the opposite. You see somebody being selfish. Those things, you got to call them out and call them out in front of everybody. That's a selfish play. Your teammate was open right here, and you went for your shot anyway, even though he's open. That's selfish. That's not how we play. Like, those things have to be put out for everybody to see. They'll see, okay, coach doesn't tolerate that at all. He's gonna be pretty angry if I don't pass this ball to this open teammate. Or, all right, coach really likes it when you make the extra pass. Okay, like, so everything has to be deliberate. You got to praise when they do the things that you want. You got to praise them for it. You got to reward them for it. And when they do the things that go against that, you got to make sure that there's a consequence for it, whether it's whatever the consequence might just be a verbal correction. It doesn't have to be they get on the line. Now, it might be if they just keep doing it, it might be like, you know what, you're not listening. So just get over here and do something.
Sort it out that way, yeah.
Yeah, since I'm telling you, you're not working. But that's the main thing I'll say. Just be deliberate in forcing them to spend time with one another, and forcing them to be selfless towards one another. And once you've done that, you got to kind of hope that it sticks. It doesn't always work. Like I mentioned, it didn't always work, in the beginning with my teams, but it'll eventually work if you stick with it.
And I just want to put a quick note on that thought about giving praise, and curious about your thoughts as well. I know I've coached players who they weren't used to getting praise, or they like it's something that's completely like foreign to them, and just saying like what they did well, or they're telling them they did a good job is like such a shock or surprise to them. I think sometimes we maybe assume that our players get praise at home, or they get recognized for the things that they do, but at least in my experience, I found a lot of players are just genuinely shocked sometimes when they even just get a compliment from me.
I think that is true, and it means more to them than I think they'll even say.
Yeah.
When they get that compliment from you, when they get that praise for you, especially when you're tough on them. You got to be. I heard this from a coach, and I never forgot it. He said, "You can only hold on. I want to make sure I quote him right. It was something. Gosh, it had to do with how much you love them, but he basically was saying." You can only be as hard on them as you love them, meaning like however hard you are on them, you have to love them that same
Mm,
that same amount.
I get it.
I
Yeah.
hate it because he said it way better than I said it. I can't.
You'll remember it the second we're done. You'll be like, oh,
Oh,
that's
I
what it
will.
was.
I'm like, that's what it was. Dang it. I know what he said because he said it at a clinic and I loved it. But yeah, but he was basically saying that however hard you run them, you have to love them just that much.
Yeah.
And so they're more willing to take it when you're hard on them, when you do yell at them and scream at them. So they'll take it because when they do right, you pat them on the back just as quick. And you tell them great job just as quick, and you shout them out and praise them just as quick. So they'll take the criticism. They may not like it, but they'll take it, saying, okay,
Sure.
And there's certain players that I'm that way on, but and certain players I can tell they really need that encouragement. So I give that encouragement to them as much as I can, because I know they need it. But yeah, you gotta praise them and you gotta love them, and honestly, you gotta do that first. They gotta really know that you care. They have to know that, and they got to know that early. And because they don't know that, then building that family atmosphere, it's gonna go on one ear and out the other. They're like, you don't care about me. You just
absolutely.
because I can play basketball.
Oh, that what's the phrase that they have to players got to learn that you care before they care to learn, sort
That's
of
right.
idea.
Yeah.
Awesome,
Yeah,
Coach.
yeah. Oh, I know what to
Go
say.
ahead.
Well, I think
Here
this
it
was
is.
it.
Yes, we
I
got it.
think this was it. Now, if I'm wrong, somebody probably hit me up like, that's not what it was. But he said you can only coach them as hard as you love them. That was
Okay.
the saying.
All
You
right.
can only coach them as hard as you love them. So if you only love them a little bit, then you can only be a little hard on them. But if you love them a lot, then you can be really hard on them. Like it has to. That's what he said. You coach them as hard as you love them.
We did it. We got it. Awesome. All righty, Coach. To wrap up, there's a couple questions I ask every guest. So I'll go ahead and get started here with this first one. Thinking back on your coaching career, what is a coaching moment that you think others listening would be able to learn from?
Well, I'll tell you one coaching moment that taught me a lot. And this is before I became a varsity coach, when I was a JV coach in Cincinnati. And my JV team, we were small. I think I had 10 or 8 guys on the roster. We were small. We were all guards. I had one semi-big player, but I'm about 6'2", and he wasn't even as tall as me. And he was the tallest player. So we were not tall at all. And we were playing a team who was really, even though again, it was JV, but their program was really tough. Like,
sure,
their name was Alter, and they actually, just to give you a idea of how good they were. This is when LeBron James was a senior in high school. This is the team he played at the state championship. Yeah, this is the program. So it's that type of program. So my team runs out, my 8 guys, my 8 little guards, and they come out 15 deep, looking like a staircase, and it's like 6'5" and 6'6" running out. And my thought in my mind, I didn't say it. My thought in my mind was, man, we're about to get blown out. Like that's what I thought. I said, wow, massive they are. Look at my little team. Like, even though I knew my guards were good, but I was just like, and we came out. We used to run I think we ran like a 2-2-1 press, and we jumped all over this team. We're blowing them out, and I'm just like, what the heck is going on? And we were up almost 20 at one point. Now they came back and tied the game up, and but my shooting guard hit the winning jumper at the buzzer to win the game. But the difference was my 8 little guards were so confident. They didn't fear that team when they ran out. They weren't impressed by them. They went and attacked them like everybody else and beat this team. And so that was a moment I never, ever forgot. And it was a lesson for me to never, ever doubt my team and never underestimate my team. And to know that as long as my players believe in themselves, they have a chance against anybody. Because that was the key. That team was just so cocky. They were like the cockiest little guards in the world and just thought they were the best around.
Yeah.
And when they saw these trees run out, they weren't intimidated at all. And I think I even remember making a joke. It was either before, not a joke, I made a comment. It was either that game or another game. We played another really good team, and that team beat us, but it took them overtime to beat us. And I made a comment about, if you don't do this, man, they're going to blow us up. I remember my guard laughing at me. It was like, you acting like we can't beat them. Like, and I was like, I'm just saying what you better do. And he was just more like, almost shot, like, why is coach acting like we can't beat them? They were so confident. And so that was a lesson I never forgot, that don't doubt my team ever. I don't care who they're playing. And if I can get them to believe, they can believe in themselves, they got a chance. So coaches, like, don't ever doubt your team. I don't care how the odds look. I don't care how good the team is you're playing against. You know, like I told you, my first Final Four team in the Elite Eight, we were supposed to lose by 20 that team. Everybody in the state said we were going to get blown out, and we beat them by 13 points. Like, get your team to believe, and not saying it's going to work every time, you know, but it'll do you great favors if you get your team to believe, and you believe in them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. It's like I try to get all the confidence in my players and make them believe, and it's like, oh, I should probably believe as a coach too. I got to do that
Right.
too and believe in them as well. That's
Absolutely.
funny. Awesome. Coach, to wrap up, I give every guest what I call a 60-second soapbox, but I'll never time you. Your platform to get out your final thought, closing message, closing idea, something that you just want to leave the listeners with. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor to you, and I'm going to let you take it from here.
Just in general, hey, whatever you do, whether we're talking about coaching or whatever it is, just don't let anybody outwork you. That's just kind of my thing as a coach, and that's what I stress to my players. Just don't get outworked. I can deal with in games if we lose to a team because they shoot better or they dribble better or they're more experienced. I can live with all that. My players know I cannot live with being outworked. I can't have it. And I, as a coach, I don't want any coach to outwork me. I don't want any team to outwork me. But take that lesson to anything. It doesn't have to be basketball. It can be anything you're doing. If it's something you're passionate about, just don't be outworked in it. And if you continue to put that work in, everything else will eventually take care of itself. Just work. I'm not saying work yourself to death. Yeah, you got to take time to yourself. Yes, you have to take time to family. Obviously, you do. But just don't let anybody outwork you in anything you do. And you'll be surprised at the results you get.
Absolutely. Well said. Couldn't put it any better myself. Coach Thomas, I want to thank you for spending some time talking about McDonough, talking about the family atmosphere that you and your staff have built there, and the results seem like they speak for itself. So I know your season's been off to a great start. So best of luck. Hope everyone stays healthy and safe, and good luck the rest of the way, Coach.
Definitely, Coach. Thanks. Same to you. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Thank you all for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast, and we will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.